Hey everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. Today we're going to talk about exhaustion, which can be, of course, physical or mental, maybe somewhere in between. But Adam, I had a couple interesting conversations this week with clients, extremely in one camp versus the other. It provided a pretty good contrast. So one of my newer clients said she gets 8 hours of sleep, full stop, just manages it, gets it done. She knows the value of that. And we had some conversation about training frequency and volume. And she said, I really feel fine training 6 days a week. And I tried to talk her down a little bit because I thought she was unnecessarily overtraining because she is in contest shape between contests. But then I have another client who is regularly getting 5 hours of sleep or less, working shifts in the medical community. And it's tough to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, train, then go take care of a 12-hour shift and work with the family and so forth. So a lot of different things to consider on either side, but the demands of training alone are substantial, require a lot of physical and mental recovery, but then you throw prep on top of it, and it's no wonder so few people who start this journey actually get to the stage. A stat I heard a few years ago that was really stunning to me is that somebody who says, I'm going to compete August 21st, only 15% of those people with that kind of an externally stated goal actually make it. So what are your thoughts on exhaustion and how that plays a role?
Yeah. Well, there's two different types of exhaustion. There's physical and mental. And one of the reasons I brought up this topic is because I'm currently dieting and I hit probably my biggest plateau that I ever hit. And I just said it's kind of time for a diet break or a little bit of a change in direction. But I also realized once I took that break, I didn't realize I was pretty physically exhausted, but how much better I felt because I'm really used to the grind, how much better I felt in the gym was, really eye-opening. And sometimes we don't even realize we're physically exhausted, and I definitely was. We tend to white knuckle through it, but then there's also the mental exhaustion, where you start questioning, wow, I don't know how much longer I can go, and you start questioning. We almost in the beginning of the process become blind and say, you just take it a day at a time, but then you start turning down more meals, you start fighting hunger longer, and you're like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I think this is one of the reasons we see that weight loss statistic that 98% of people that lose the weight gain it back, because you had the rest of your life to gain that weight back that you lost, and all this mental and physical exhaustion coming into play. So but in the demands of contest prep, I think that's really important that we, give our clients insight, give our clients breaks. And one, having clients recognize it, I think can sometimes be the hardest thing, because how can they reflect that to you unless they know how to describe it or if they're experiencing it?
Yeah, and I like the contrast of my client who said she guards her sleep because she just knows how important it is. I think at different times of life that is more difficult, but let's talk about the physical first because I think that can be a little bit more cut and dry in terms of how to approach it. And then on the psychological side, there are definitely some things to consider, even culturally. But gosh, I think back to my preps and I, seem to, I guess maybe my first contest or two, I didn't have children, but most of my career, especially my entire career as a pro bodybuilder, I had kids, I had a business, I was very busy, and I looked toward prep as a stabilizing anchor because I was able to say, okay, this is important. I know I've got to allocate a lot of time and mental resources to this. So I just have to guard that, similar to my client. And yet, you still end up having to catch up on sleep. You have to make decisions. Should I train today or not? Because I'm just beat up and I'm sore and I'm not recovering as well. I'm not sleeping enough. And you have to make those calls. And it's always the right call. I'm just going to be as dogmatic as possible to take the rest. I mean, it really is. Anybody who is just languishing in physical exhaustion because of overtraining, it's just always the right thing to do to take a day, catch up on sleep, let your body recover, and you're going to come back stronger and better. Outside of the obvious risk of injury, at this phase of life where I don't have kids at home and I've intentionally streamlined my life a little bit, it still surprises me when I do take time off, like you described, how much better I feel. Like you really don't sometimes catch all of the symptoms of just your physical exhaustion. We like to pay the price. That's part of this lifestyle is we're willing to do the work, we're willing to do what it takes. Physical pain in the gym, soreness, recovery, that kind of thing. It just doesn't bother most of us, but sometimes we objectively need to really put a measurement on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where, you know, people are afraid to go the opposite direction, even just for a short amount of time. But one of the things that can trap people is, maybe they see a drop in inflammation or a drop in water weight from taking that break. Then they can start thinking, oh, I had a refeed and I lost weight. Maybe I need more food, and it can become a dangerous territory. But I think this is what really makes coaches unique is their ability to relieve the stress and deload that stress off a client and then get back into it and how they do that and how they manipulate it. And there's a lot of different coaches that do things a lot of different ways. I know you and I aren't necessarily huge believers in deloads. We would rather just take the time off from the gym. And I'm a huge believer in that because we want to keep intensity. I think when we start teaching training lighter and just getting through it versus like having an intense session, you start saying in habits. The same with cardio. Like the moment you start doing cardio without pep in your step, you're always going to do that cardio at a lesser intensity. So these are the reasons we do some of these things the way that we do. So I think that that's really important to, catch yourself when you're in the moments of doing things easier, hitting less weight in your workouts, walking slower, or just getting through your cardio. And it's definitely one of those issues. I definitely saw it with a client where we got, 3 weeks out and she started making more progress than she had ever made in the prep, but nothing had really changed. She just became the rabbit in the race, and that's a combination of mental and physical exhaustion that just wasn't presented to me. And after the show, we talked about what you did in this last 3 weeks. Had we done that the other 10 that we had, you would have been ready on time.
Yeah, and there's just such a definite advantage to it. We all know you catch up on sleep, you haven't been getting enough, and all of a sudden you sleep 9 or 10 hours one day over the weekend. How much better that makes you physically feel. I think a lot of clients errantly think they're just going to lose muscle. If I miss that day, I've got to get that chest day in. I've got to get that leg day in. I've got to make sure I hit my glutes 3 times a week. And if you just realize that the counter argument to that is far more true. First of all, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks of detraining to literally start losing amino acid content and muscle. But that's kind of the fear, and people just have to give it a try. But on the mental type of exhaustion, I want to briefly talk about two unrelated pieces of research I reviewed last week that show the power of our perspective when it comes to mental exhaustion. Because assuming physically you're okay, you're not overtraining, you're getting enough sleep, where would that mental exhaustion come from? It has to be some form of anxiety and worry that may or may not be useful. I would argue it's probably less useful than you think. So I reviewed this research that people who say they are gluten intolerant were divided up into groups. Those who would receive, without knowing it, a gluten substance, in bread. They were told they're getting gluten-free bread and they were literally getting gluten. Other people were told they were getting gluten and yet they were not. And then they had control groups. And the people who said, I am definitely gluten intolerant, I just know it, even when they were not given gluten, they reported significant GI upset, even stool changes and so forth, meaning psychosomatically, just the perspective of assuming something wasn't right made your body react like it wasn't right. That's stunning. It's just stunning how much our mind can create reality, even in physical symptomatology. Another one was in social hierarchy. So, every culture is different, but we as human primates, we create social hierarchies, whether it's socioeconomic or your physical stature or your age, whatever it is, we tend to rank people in terms of their importance to us, to society, their worth, etc. And what we see is just that mindset alone gives people reduced health outcomes and, of course, reports of happiness and contentment. So you look at the people that society would say you are better than those people, and everybody, quote, below you, perceived by yourself as below you, they actually physically have worse health outcomes, worse longevity, worse happiness. Those who you perceive as above you, their station in life is perceived as more valuable by you. They literally physically have better health, better longevity, and so forth. And what changed? Literally nothing. It's just your mindset of your social rank. So, pulling all of that into what this means for competitors, how do you look at your prep? How do you look at the amount of work you're putting into it? Does it give you energy? Do you feel great? Because as I said earlier, it's a stabilizing, anchoring force that really gives you something to look forward to. Or is it just adding dread and fatigue because you're just doing too much? So I'm sure you have a lot of stories with 15 or 20 years of coaching, Adam, in that regard.
I think that people tend to repeat preps less often than, do their first one. And I think when you do your first prep, the excitement of seeing what's underneath the fluff is very exciting. Me being a decade post competition, I'm kind of excited to see my body again. That's been my driving force and my curiosity in it. It took 10 years of me not doing it to have that happen. Not that I'm in a prep, but I'm just seeing my body change. And I think sometimes once we have the answer, it becomes a little less exciting, or we're like, can I be better? And that has to be the driving force. So I think at the end of the day, we have to have a reason. And we oftentimes ask, what is your why? And I think a lot of people miss their why, or maybe the why isn't good enough once the systemic stress sets in. And once you start feeling the hunger, once you start feeling the tiredness, and I'm not gonna lie, when I did my diet break, part of me said, why would I go back from this? But I'm still curious. I'm like, you know what? I'm curious enough to keep moving forward. So, and I also realized, just being in my mid 40s almost now, it's just for my overall health, to extend the longevity of my life. I want to stay leaner. I want to make sure I never get loose skin. So being leaner now can be my best, you know, chance at not having loose skin. So losing the weight now is really key.
Yeah, and all those little pieces of motivation can mean something different at different times of our lives. The context of every single person, I think, should be relevant and considered by yourself as you're going through a prep. But I want to take your example and expand it just a little bit. We know as coaches, somebody getting ready for their first contest, it is a literal honeymoon period. And what's really interesting to me, going back to that mindset and how that sets the stage for your physical results, I certainly remember that. I had kind of a honeymoon experience two or three times because you're doing it the first time and you think, okay, I had no idea what I was doing, but that was fun. Now I feel like I have the experience and I'm going to really do something. And so as long as you have something that you're looking toward as this next great level, that excitement can really carry you far. And again, you and I know with clients, the people who just don't feel or report discomfort with hunger, with any part of the process, and they almost robotically can just get the job done. We sometimes say, well, great, they have those personality traits, their dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, blah, 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 blah. But maybe it's just the fact that they have that much of an intrinsic desire this time out that it supersedes everything else. And then later, as you said, your 10th contest, your 20th year competing, if that goal isn't big enough, if it doesn't outweigh all of the other demands of your life, it's going to be really hard to create that out of nothing. So I think it is important for people to really assess how you can objectively manage those expectations, and can you put that desire into the same level of intensity that you had before. And I think the reason we try so often, Adam, is because we want to exercise that muscle as you are in your current, personal transformation. You just said it's been 10 years since you've competed. You want to kind of see if you've made progress in muscle shape, the strength and the consistency of your training has done something. So you're excited to see that. How do you make sure that excitement translates into a very successful and worthwhile prep that you're happy with, once you get to the other side?
Well, I think you can't be so focused on the outcome. I think that's the biggest thing is some of that excitement comes down to winning for people. And, it is exciting to win, but you can have competitors come from either side of the United States or wherever you're competing. And it's always that person you didn't see coming, that takes the win from you. Oftentimes it is. Even as a coach, I think I've got a client who's going to win. They're hands down look better than anybody I've seen. And then someone comes in, I'm like, where did they come from? I never saw them. To me, that's the excitement of the sport, though. But I think not being so weighed in on the outcome because it's something that we really can't control. But I do find that that's often sometimes what keeps people going at the same time. So you just can't crash and burn if the outcome's not what you expected.
Yeah, I was just speaking to somebody. It must have been at the SNA conference, um, who agreed with me, and it's the first time I found somebody that in my entire career, even as a growing, somewhat successful pro, I always loved the process more than the day of the contest. The excitement looking at here's what I'm going to do differently, here's what I've learned, here's what I'm going to try. Got all these plans, all these metrics I'm going to be measuring to really guide my success. And then you get to the contest, and that is always literally, even when I won, it was just the worst day. I shouldn't say worst. It was the least fun day because I really did have a perspective of that long-term change and the trajectory of the career I wanted didn't always have to happen at this show or even this year. That excitement is there. That definitely propels us. But I really think you're onto something there. It shows if you can say that you're patient and every contest is not a do or die win, that you really do have more of an internally, intrinsically guided goal. And that will not only give you more acute happiness in whatever outcome there is, but it will definitely give you a longer career perspective where I think you can really enjoy the entire thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had countless athletes, be with me 5, 6, 8 years, continuing their journey. And I feel like I do a good job on, reeling them in on, enjoying the process, congratulating them on the changes they've personally made to their body, and getting results, because that's why you do this.
Yep. All right, everybody. Physical exhaustion is one thing. You have to mitigate that with proper rest and recovery and avoiding overtraining. Mental exhaustion, I'm going to say, has a lot to do with our perspective, but also physical demands of family, occupation, just biting off more than you can chew when it comes to a competitive schedule. Those things also have to be objectively managed. But I really do think most of the anxiety or stress that adds to a physical level of exhaustion is ours to master and manage. So I can't wait to talk about this with our D1 club. Once we post this early for them and for the rest of the world, we'll be having a chat about that. If you are not part of our D1 club, for just $3 a month, you can be in this private group where you have access to our staff and we chat about these things, even helping you, whether you have a coach outside of our system and network, or you coach yourself, you have access to us for some extra guidance. But Adam, great topic again, and I will see you and all of our guests next time in Contest Prep University.